There are legends whispered in the shadows of society. Tales of men who ride the edge, clad in leather, their faces etched with the hard truth of the road. These are the men of the Iron Horsemen Motorcycle Club, an infamous name, often painted with the brush of outlaw, menace, and bad news. To the general public, they represent everything wrong with the rigid structure of a law-abiding world. They are the boogeymen parents warn their kids about, the specters of danger looming at the city limits. But what the public doesn't know, what the headlines refuse to acknowledge, is that sometimes the hardest shells conceal the deepest wells of humanity, the purest instincts of protection. Today we peel back the layers of that reputation and witness a moment where the monsters became the guardians, and the roar of their engines silenced a very real, very insidious threat. The setting was a bright, slightly too warm Saturday afternoon. The air smelled of freshly cut grass, cheap hot dogs, and excited childish energy. We were at the local minor league baseball stadium, a place usually synonymous with simple pleasures and innocent fun. The Iron Horsemen were there not to cause trouble, not to challenge authority, but for a simple, poignant reason. Their treasurer, a giant of a man known only as Boulder, had lost his younger brother to cancer 5 years prior. That loss had never truly healed. So Boulder, using the club's often considerable, albeit often questionably sourced funds, had established a foundation that sponsored local youth sports teams, especially those catering to underprivileged kids. The team playing that afternoon, the Rattlers, was the latest recipient of their generosity. Uniforms, equipment, even a refurbished team van, all courtesy of the Iron Horsemen. A dozen members of the club, including the president, a formidable man named Grizz, sat tucked away in a corner section of the stands. They looked exactly as you'd expect. Beards, tattoos, the unmistakable leather cuts bearing the club's patch, a winged horse head framed by flames. Their presence was a physical statement, an intimidating but silent commitment to the kids they were supporting. Other fans, mostly families, kept a polite distance, casting nervous, sidelong glances. There was an undeniable tension in the air, the kind that happens when two worlds, strictly forbidden to mingle, collide in public. Yet the kids themselves, the Rattlers, were oblivious. To them, these were just the big, friendly, slightly scary-looking guys who bought them new bats. The game was in the top of the third inning. It was a standard, leisurely pace, the kind of game where you worry more about spilling your soda than the final score. In the front row, directly below the section where the horsemen were seated, sat a small family. A mother, appearing tired but determined. A boy maybe 10 years old, absorbed in the game. And a little girl, no older than 7, clutching a teddy bear. The little girl, her name was Lily, was noticeably quiet. Her eyes weren't on the field. They were darting nervously, fixed on a man sitting 2 rows in front of her family. This man, unremarkable in a polo shirt and khaki shorts, was laughing loudly, chatting with the people next to him, blending into the crowd perfectly. He looked like any other suburban father enjoying a Saturday, but to Lily, he was something else entirely. Suddenly, the batter hit a line drive foul. The crowd reacted with a collective "ooh!" and the momentary burst of noise seemed to break Lily's careful composure. She instinctively clutched her mother's arm, her small face contorted in fear, pointing a trembling finger not at the ball, but at the man in the polo shirt. Her voice, thin and clear, cut through the background hum of the stadium, delivering a line that would instantly freeze the entire section, silencing the easy laughter and the casual chatter. She repeated it, this time louder, her small voice amplified by the sudden attention. "He's the monster! Mom! He's the monster!" The silence was immediate and absolute, heavier than the roar of a jet engine. Everyone stopped. The man in the polo shirt froze, his casual smile evaporating. His eyes snapped toward Lily, and for a fleeting, terrifying second, the disguise dropped. His reaction was not the confusion of a wrongly accused man, but the cold, calculating panic of a predator caught in the light. He immediately stood up, feigning offense, preparing to retreat into the anonymity of the crowd, but the crowd was frozen. They were paralyzed by the confusion of the moment, the unsettling declaration from a child, the shocking contrast between the man's benign appearance and the terror in Lily's eyes. They looked at the man, then at Lily, then back at the man, their minds struggling to process the accusation. The mother, visibly distraught, tried to pull Lily close, murmuring apologies to the confused bystanders, attempting to minimize the scene. She was caught between protecting her child and the embarrassment of a public outburst. Up in the stands, however, a group of men didn't freeze. The Iron Horsemen MC, men trained to read the silent language of threat and aggression, reacted with the devastating speed of instinct honed by years on the road and years of dealing with genuine danger. They didn't hear a child making a mistake. They heard a desperate alarm bell. They saw the man's eyes, the instant shift from amusement to lethal panic, and they knew, without a doubt, that Lily wasn't talking about some imaginary creature. Grizz, the president, who hadn't taken his eyes off the man since the accusation, didn't waste a second. He simply raised a hand, a silent signal, and the well-oiled machine of the MC sprang into action. 4 of the largest members, including Boulder, moved simultaneously, not rushing, but descending with controlled, heavy intent. They formed a silent, impenetrable wedge, cutting off the man's escape route towards the main exit tunnels. The rest of the club members stood up, their towering figures creating a physical wall that immediately commanded attention. The entire section of the stands was now completely silent. The casual noise of the game replaced by a terrifying quiet, broken only by the approaching measured heavy footsteps of the patch holders. The man, realizing his flight path was blocked not by police, but by a force far more unpredictable and intimidating, dropped his attempt at a casual walkaway. He spun around, looking for an opening, a weakness. He found none. He was boxed in, trapped between the stands and the silent, imposing wall of leather and muscle. Grizz was the one to speak, his voice a low, gravelly rumble that was somehow more frightening than a shout. He didn't address the crowd. He spoke only to the man, every word loaded with chilling certainty. "She said you're the monster." The man tried to sputter a denial, an excuse, something about a misunderstanding about crazy kids. But before he could get a full sentence out, Boulder was beside him, not touching him, not threatening him with a punch, but simply existing in his space, a monumental roadblock of silent judgment. Boulder's gaze, steady and cold, communicated everything. The sheer, overwhelming presence of the Iron Horsemen had successfully frozen the crowd, but more importantly, it had frozen the true threat. The man was terrified, not of the law, but of the immediate, visceral justice that stared him down. Lily, now safely tucked into her mother's chest, watched as her monster stood helpless, exposed for the first time. The game had stopped entirely. The umpire, the players and the fans were all witnesses to the moment the Outlaws chose their side, drawing a line in the dirt, protecting the innocent with the only currency they truly had: fear and intimidation. The real game had just begun. The atmosphere was thick, less like a sporting event and more like a tense standoff in an old Western movie. The silence was so profound that you could hear the distant, confused murmurs of the fans further down the bleachers, wondering why the game had ground to a halt. The Iron Horsemen were statuesque, their stance a clear declaration: no one moves until we say so. Grizz held his position, his eyes locked on the terrified man, allowing the sheer weight of the moment to bear down on the suspect. The man, sweating profusely despite the cool stadium breeze, finally realized the gravity of his situation. His attempts to justify his presence, to explain away Lily's words as a child's fantasy, crumbled under the unflinching stare of the club members. Grizz's next words weren't a demand, but a simple statement of fact, cutting through the man's weak protestations. "We didn't ask for your life story. We asked for you to stay put." The implicit threat was clear: compliance was the safer option. Simultaneously, another member of the MC, a man called Doc, who ironically held no medical degree but was the club's communications and security specialist, was already on the phone, speaking in clipped, rapid sentences. Doc wasn't calling the local police non-emergency line. He was calling someone he knew, an old contact in the sheriff's department, cutting through the usual bureaucratic red tape. The situation was too delicate, too focused on a child's trauma, to rely on a standard dispatch procedure. They needed people they could trust, people who wouldn't dismiss the accusation as hysteria. The mother, still holding Lily tightly, finally found her voice, a broken whisper that confirmed the men's suspicions. He was the coach of her old soccer team last year. We moved. We thought we were safe. Her eyes, filled with fear and a dawning sense of relief, flicked from the suspect to the formidable figures of the bikers. In that single sentence, the entire narrative shifted. The child's cry was not a random delusion. It was recognition. The monster was real, and he was a predator who had actively sought out positions of trust to target vulnerable children. The public silence of the crowd transformed into a chilling collective realization. Murmurs began to ripple, not of fear of the MC, but whispers of horrified understanding about the man. Grizz nodded slowly, processing the information. He addressed the mother, his voice softening just enough to be reassuring but still maintaining his hard edge. "You did good, ma'am. You keep her close. We got this." His assurance was absolute, delivered with the kind of unshakable authority that comes from facing down real danger, not imagined threats. This was the moment the Iron Horsemen shed their outlaw moniker for protector. They weren't using violence, they were using their reputation, their sheer intimidating presence, as a shield for the innocent. They were using the fear they usually inspired to establish an undeniable boundary of safety. Within minutes, the sirens began to wail in the distance, confirming Doc's efficiency. As the patrol cars pulled up outside the stadium and two plainclothes detectives, men who clearly knew Doc, made their way quickly into the stands, the atmosphere changed again. The crowd, having watched the whole scenario unfold, now offered no resistance, no confusion. They parted for the detectives, their attention focused on the man who was now visibly shaking. The horsemen had done their job. They hadn't beaten him. They hadn't physically assaulted him. They had simply detained him, using the psychological weight of their collective power. Grizz stepped aside as the detectives reached the scene. One of them, a detective named Harper, a tired-looking man with an equally tired but determined gaze, met Grizz's eyes. There was a brief, silent acknowledgement between the two, a nod that spoke volumes of their complicated, unspoken relationship. Harper knew that if the Iron Horsemen were this involved, the accusation was solid. They didn't intervene lightly, and they didn't make mistakes when protecting children. "He goes with us, Grizz," Harper stated, his voice professional. "He ain't hurt, Harper, just rattled," Grizz replied, a hint of something dark and dangerous in his tone. "But you tell me right now, before he leaves this spot, you gonna do your job, or we gonna do ours?" The detective didn't hesitate. "The charges are already being processed based on Doc's information. We have the warrants. We take it from here." It was enough. With a final shared look of grim satisfaction, the Iron Horseman stepped back. The suspect, now under police custody, was led away, his previous arrogance utterly destroyed. As he was escorted past the mother and Lily, the little girl, tucked securely in her mother's arms, looked up. She didn't look scared anymore. She looked like a witness who had finally been heard. And then, something extraordinary happened. The crowd, which had initially recoiled from the sight of the bikers, began to applaud, not loudly, but with a respectful, measured rhythm. They weren't applauding the police. They were applauding the silent guardians in leather who had the courage and the presence of mind to act when everyone else froze. As the police led the man away and the game finally resumed, the Iron Horsemen simply gathered their things. They didn't wait for praise, didn't accept the tentative thank yous offered by a few brave spectators. They quietly descended the stands and headed for the parking lot. Before starting his engine, Boulder paused and walked over to the mother and Lily. He didn't say much. He just knelt down, his massive frame awkwardly close to the ground, and placed the small teddy bear that Lily had dropped back into her hands. "Keep your eyes open, kid," he rumbled gently, "and never stop telling the truth." Then, with the thunderous roar of a dozen powerful engines igniting simultaneously, the Iron Horsemen rode out, leaving behind them a confused, grateful, and fundamentally changed community. They rode back into the shadows, back to their world of complex rules and dangerous reputations, leaving behind a simple, undeniable truth. Sometimes, the greatest heroes don't wear capes or badges. They wear the patch of the misunderstood, roaring down the highway on two wheels, fiercely protecting the weak from the monsters who hide in plain sight. They are the outlaws who understand the true meaning of the law of the heart.